From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Welcome to OpenLine. So glad you're with us. We are talking about the documentary you have just watched, a very powerful documentary about the shaping of Nashville public schools. We aired it for the entire last hour. No commercials. It aired in its entirety over the last hour. In this hour, we're going to talk to one of the people behind it, another person who was in it, and allow you to call in with your questions, comments, thoughts. So let's introduce our guests. They're joining us via Zoom right now. We have Cour. She is president and CEO of the Nashville Public Education Foundation, which was behind this documentary. Katie, thank you for being here. And David Ewing, historian, well-known Nashville historian, and you're in there often. And David, thank you also for being here. So, Katie, let me start with you. You're airing this, you're screening this all around the city, and you're hoping to generate a conversation. It's very powerful. I'm glad we were able to air it in its entirety on News Channel 5 Plus. Why do you feel like this is important to talk about now?
Right. It was really powerful to watch it again in this medium. So, you know, the Nashville Public Education Foundation is a nonprofit that works to support our public schools. And we do that in a variety of ways. But one of the main things we do is try to figure out what barriers are in place that are preventing some of our kids from thriving. And so we realized in the foundation that we didn't have a clear understanding of why certain policies were put in place that were leading our discussions around schools today and really determining how we do schooling in the city of Nashville. And so we started just having internal conversations. Why do we do things this way? Why are patterns of zoning done this way? Why do we have certain schools in certain areas? And we realized that it would be really helpful, or we think it would be really helpful, to share that story with the community. And we decided to build this documentary to do just that. And David, as a historian, you're in this documentary a great deal. What you probably knew this history. You've talked to people after having screened it. What do you think is least understood by many who watch this, and maybe this illuminates? What are some of the things that this illuminates that are perhaps least understood in your opinion?
Well, that the struggle to improve education is a long struggle, and it's still going. And that's why people should support our public schools, should support the Nashville Education Foundation in their quest to kind of talk about the past and get people excited about what changes that need to be made today and basically educate our entire population. You know, older people who went to segregated schools kind of remember these stories. But one of the most interesting things about kind of how Nashville evolved, you know, Brown versus Board of Education was in 1954, and 3 years later, our schools had not changed one bit. They were all white and all black, and it took lawsuits and struggles and, you know, marching through gauntlets and then, of course, bombing schools. It was a very contentious time. You know, everyone talks about 2020 being the worst year in Nashville. You know, I'd put 1957 up there with one of the biggest struggles that we've had as a city.
And there is some tough history in here. And David, why do you think it's important to kind of revisit that as we talk about improving our schools going forward?
Well, that's the foundation that this is all built on. And if you look at, you know, why our schools were started, and then we had two separate school systems. We really had four, talking about, you know, the county and city, then black and white, and why there were some inequities kind of built in the system. I love the name of the documentary, By Design, that literally from day one, it was kind of created this way. But we need to learn from that and just to try to have everyone have the same equal opportunity for a great education in our public school system.
There's some powerful questions right off the top of the documentary that are asked right off the top. Is our education system outdated? How was our education system designed? Who was it created for? And so, Katie, how would you answer those questions after having put your heart and soul into this documentary? How do you think those questions, are they answered, and how do you think they are?
Well, I don't think they're answered. I think the questions about who the system was designed for is answered in the documentary, which is it was clearly designed for white students. It was not intentionally designed to serve all of our students equitably or justly. And we are still seeing the ramifications of that in the way our schools operate today. And so going forward, the documentary certainly does not answer the question of what do we do next. It gives you some teasers of like, what are some things we need to be thinking about so we don't repeat these same patterns, these same historical inequities and injustices. But we haven't decided what that next needs to look like. And so that's where we're really excited at the foundation to dive into with the community and host a series of community conversations to explore what individual families think needs to happen next to support our public schools and build a better city to prioritize children and youth.
And some of the information I have that you all provided, you also ask a series of questions. One of those questions, how is Nashville in danger of repeating its history, is another one of the conversations you want to get going as a result of this documentary. And so, Katie, I ask you, how is Nashville in danger of repeating this history?
Well, our school system was designed to really benefit the, at the time, majority population, which was a white population. And even though our white students have decreased in the district and the district has become much more diverse, we are still in designing some of the way we do our schools around a mentality to meet the needs of white families. I definitely want our schools to meet the needs of white families, but I certainly want them to meet the needs of all families as well. And so that we see hints of systems in our entire city, not just in our schools, that are pushing out other families, other people of color in particular, from opportunities that other people and other students in our community can have. So parts of our immigrant population are not able to access certain services, certain communities, certain schools in the way that others are, for example.
And talk about just putting this together. I mean, this is incredibly ambitious. You go back to the 1800s and go all the way up to present day. You interview mayors and city leaders and teachers and all kinds. Why did you decide to do this? Why did you decide a documentary is the way to go with this? And how hard was it to put together?
Well, the first thing we did, honestly, was call David Ewing, because he is a local expert we all know and love, and he really understands, first of all, just being a native Nashvilleian, but also really embedded in the story himself. And he has a wonderful history, if you haven't heard it himself, to explore in addition to his wonderful archiving of Nashville's history. But we also engaged other historians and really tried to get a sense of what the story was, which, again, we didn't fully understand. It was a large undertaking by our team, and then also by Metro Archives and the library services, and a lot of other people that were put in place to really help us move this along. I think we felt like a documentary was the right way to share the story. We thought about a museum pop-up. We thought about a coffee table book, all of which we might do in the future. But a documentary gives you that spoken word from the lived experiences of those who went through this time period, such as the amazing voices of our the individuals who integrated our school that were profiled in the feature. You can't get that by looking at a picture, and so it's really powerful, I think, to hear when one of our desegregationists said, we heard the bomb, we felt it in our bones. Like, you really get a sense that I don't think you would get otherwise. So.
And David, as a historian, there are probably times you hear people say, well, that's in the past, let's move forward. And if somebody were to say that about this, what do you say?
Well, it's part of our fabric, and it's part of kind of our challenge today. So we put this out there to start a conversation on why are we not more involved in our school systems? What can people do to help? And let's not repeat some of the same mistakes we did. We have a lot to be proud of our school system. We've educated some of our greatest leaders, not only in this city, in the country. As you know, you're sitting in the building where a young African-American anchor named Oprah Winfrey got her first start in television, but she's a graduate of East Nashville High School. And so there are so many great stories to tell, and it all starts with education.
That's great. That's great, David. All right, I'm gonna take calls, and I encourage people to call in. We have a caller here. Let's go to Regina. Hello, Regina.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
Go right ahead. What's on your mind, Regina? So you should turn down your TV. Everyone turn down your TV.
Okay, hold on.
And then we can all ask the questions.
Okay. I'm sorry.
All right, go right ahead, Regina.
Okay. I just come in on this conversation, but my concern is with some of the schools, and one in particular is Laughlin Design School. I'm very heartbroken over the fact that there's no African American teachers there. The ratio of black students, and I'm speaking from experience because my granddaughter was there, and I think she was only 3 in that whole school. I found that the teachers, her teacher in particular, was not showing any type of compassion, sympathy toward this child. She made her feel like an outcast. She was different. Growing up in the 70s at Cameron High School, we had some Caucasian kids to come in, and our teachers done their darndest to make them feel welcome. They didn't come out with their heads hanging down, wanted to leave the school because they wasn't black. I think, and this has come up once before, about that school operating on what they want to do and not with the board having any kind of input. I even asked the principal, who do you answer to? Her answer was, we don't have to answer to the Board of Education. This is a serious matter that's going on over there at Laughlin Design School. And it's been going on for many years. And Avon Williams, if he was alive today, he would be really, really heartbroken.
Okay, Regina. All right, thank you. I really appreciate your call. And that school, it's in East Nashville. There have been stories done. I think WPLN did a big story about that school. Maybe it speaks to a bigger issue, and maybe I won't ask either of you to speak directly about Laughlin, but a bigger issue, and it's even brought up to some extent, well, really well done in the documentary about segregation through zoning. But you hear Regina's concern about one school that is not diverse, and so Katie, what do you have to say there?
Yeah, I appreciate that comment so much. And if you haven't already, the promise from WPLN is just outstanding and does such an amazing job highlighting Laughlin and Warner Elementary, which is right down the street, and is really the exact opposite, 95% plus African American students. So encourage everyone to listen to that podcast, really wonderful, by Maribel Knight. So I think the other question that came out from Regina's comment was really important too, which was that we need faculty, we need teachers who can relate to students who don't look like them. And Nashville, our schools are no different than many urban districts, but we really struggle to find diverse teachers who want to work in our schools. And so I think we're only around, the low 20% of our teachers are Black, the rest are white. We have a very small percentage of teachers who are Latino and Latinx. And I think we need to start there. We need to have a very robust recruitment campaign that encourages people of color to teach in our district, makes them feel supported and welcome in our district. And then, of course, I think we need to do ongoing training and supports for our current teachers, many of whom are just incredible at relating to students who don't look like them, but many of whom could use help in that area.
They're a powerful part of the film is when it discusses the use of zoning to avoid desegregation. And David, I think you were talking about that. Kind of give us the overview on that. How was zoning used to avoid or deal with desegregation in Nashville?
Well, there was a group of people, and you have to remember in the 60s when we had an appointed school board by the mayor and only one African-American member, Mr. Cresswell, we had a situation where certain members were trying to still keep certain schools white because that whole neighborhood was white, and to prevent busing or anything else, just let everyone go to their neighborhood schools and basically ignore the Supreme Court decision that basically told everyone to desegregate, as we had for 3 years after Brown. But clearly, because of the federal lawsuits filed by C. Alexander Luby and Avon Williams, and later Richard Dinkins, all that changed and all the schools had to be open.
That's so interesting, the use of zoning. And you talk about busing and the time that we lost 20,000 students. So when busing came in, that was a devastating time. What about that, David?
And one of the worst legacies in our whole school system, and we've still never recovered from that, is busing. So in 1971, we had 91,000 students in the public school system, and the population of Nashville is about 400,000. Today, we only have 84,000, and we have 300,000 more people living in the city. We have never recovered from busing, so the number of students should be higher in Metro, and actually that is why our taxes aren't as high as they could be, because we should probably have another 30 or 40,000 students in our city. We need more schools, more teachers, more bus drivers, but because people have voted with their feet to leave the county when they have school-aged kids or go to private schools, it's still just unbelievable how we could have fewer students in our public school system than we did almost 50 years ago.
And was that kind of an aha moment for you, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. When we started going through the data to see, when you see the blue line at the top that shows the different student numbers throughout the last 200 years, it was shocking to us that we lost those 20,000 students in 1971 in the early 70s. But then also that we went from this majority white student population to what is now there's no majority population, no majority racial group in our district. So we have roughly a third Hispanic, roughly a third African American, and roughly a third white, with a little bit of other races, of course, represented as well. That is a big difference in the way a system operates and in who it's serving. And so that was an eye-opener for all of us, even though we all knew, of course, that our schools have become more diverse.
So we're talking about By Design, the shaping of Nashville's public schools, the documentary put together by the Nashville Public Education Foundation. It's been screening all around the city. We just aired it in its entirety in the last hour. And so I encourage you to call in with your questions, your thoughts, whatever you want to call in. There's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break, continue our discussion right after this.